Hello and welcome to the Sport Life Balance Podcast. Today we have an amazing show for you. We have a great guest in Tyler Smith, former Humboldt Broncos hockey player, co-host of the Speak Your Mind podcast. He also has a clothing brand, Not Alone Co., and he does public speaking engagements on mental health. We had an amazing conversation, Tyler and I, talking about just his life and journey through hockey, the impact his parents had, what he sees, some of the differences from when he grew up in the dressing room to what it's like now, just some of the challenges and opportunities we have to talk about mental health, whether it's within the family or within the dressing room or beyond. Tyler shares some great insights and just a great conversation. So without further ado, here is our conversation with Tyler.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Awesome. So Tyler Smith, welcome to the Sport Life Balance podcast. So excited to have you on today.
Yeah, Chris, appreciate it. Yeah, I think this is I really do enjoy like these little conversations that I probably, 2 years ago probably wouldn't have anticipated really having. But it's it's something I enjoy, and it's something that I always, get something from as well. So
yeah, really cool. Well, I know that our audience will get a lot from this today, and appreciate your time. So yeah, start us off. Why don't you go back in time and just tell us a bit about life growing up in sports and hockey and what your hockey journey was like.
Yeah, I think I was pretty fortunate. I look back now and probably, I think as a kid, we all kind of take for granted what our parents do for us. But I mean, the fact that it was usually end of summer, starting fall, and then right into winter. I mean, like the hockey grind, and then like come springtime, it was lacrosse, and then come spring and summer, it was golf. And I think it was, we had quite the agenda. Like my brother didn't do lacrosse. He did like spring hockey. So there was a little bit of, I guess some balance there for our parents. But for the most part, I mean, the only reason I really got into hockey, I would say, is just because of my brother, like classic, like he played. And I was like, well, at least I should try it too. We moved from Hinton, Alberta when we were 5, and my brother was already playing at that time. And then I started to get into hockey as well once we got into Leduc. And it's crazy to obviously look back and to see the friendships that I still have with like a lot of those foundational, teams that I grew up with. And I mean, I think the other best part was we were very successful teams. It seems as though, like I had a discussion with my friend the other day about like growing up, were you ever really on losing teams? And I can honestly say like, it was pretty amazing that we never really, like in Leduc and our age groups and stuff, like had like major losing teams. And like, I obviously now I can look back and be like, well, if we grew up on losing teams our whole life, like would I still have had the passion that I did? But I can remember, winning an Adam AA championship in Beaumont. I can remember, Pee Wee AA provincial championships, losing to Camrose. Like we really were like a good team, but we also just had, I mean, I can count the coaches that we grew up with that were all pretty profound. And I mean, you can see even some of the coaches we had, their kids in the NHL now. So I think it's just like, it's crazy to look at, but I mean, sport was everything to us. Like my mom and dad never really played. But me and my brother did something at all times during the year. And the fact that they, continually just, drove us around and took us to this tournament and this tournament. And I think it goes to show obviously how much they loved that community as well. I think you can talk to my parents and the amount of, connections that they still have with parents that they grew up with as well, because both of their kids were playing on the same team. There was just a lot of good memories, and there was a lot of good experience. But yeah, I can honestly say sport's probably a 90% of the reason. Well, maybe not 90. That's probably a big stretch, but I think sports and my parents are, the major reason I am the person I am today. And I think a lot of it obviously was the hockey world, and just like that community that we formed. And like I said, the success we continually had as teams growing up, it was pretty fun.
Yeah. Wow. That's so great. And you bring up an interesting point, and something maybe I've never really thought about either, but like how much of an impact does winning have on your success as an athlete, or even just like your passion, your connection to the game you play? Like you already mentioned a few like specifics that you remember from way back. Like are those the memories that stand out to you the most, or do you have other like more fond memories that are not directly related to winning?
No, I mean, I think we still obviously will always cherish those, like, just like daily memories of even just like a tournament that we went to. Like, we might not have won the tournament or anything, but just like the tournament and like the fun factor of that and like the pure enjoyment. But it is interesting. And I think unfortunately with losing teams, I think a huge impact of whether or not you can keep that passion is the coaches and is the parents and is like the supporting cast with the team. Because I mean, don't get me wrong, I've still been on losing teams and it's tough, like it's tougher, but I think, there comes more of like that real like challenge of like challenging yourself and also challenging your teammates to continue to have those spirits and like hold that passion within, whether or not you're a winning or losing team. I think there is a lot that goes into the performance of the people around and not directly involved with the team, but just like that supporting cast and like constantly, staying upbeat and staying optimistic. And obviously as much as, losing teams, it's maybe not as fun as a winning team, but like you can still learn a lot in a season and you can still grow a lot. And I think there is something to be said about growth, not just in winning teams, but in losing teams as well. But yeah, it is an interesting point.
Yeah. Something I never really thought about before, but I think we'll explore that in the future, maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I love how much you've already shared, like how, like obviously your parents, our parents play a huge role in our life in general, but like especially in sport, like they sacrifice often a lot for us to be in sport, period. And then whether it's their time and driving you to the rink or the hill or wherever you're going, and the financial commitment, like there's just it's endless, like the commitment that they make in us. So how do you feel your parents best supported you in your hockey life?
Yeah, I think our parents did a really good job of obviously wanting us to enjoy the sport, but also, I mean, they want to be involved as well. Like, it's not like they kind of just, coasted and let us completely do our thing. Did I have a couple conversations with my dad after games that maybe weren't as fun as other conversations? Absolutely. But I think that's just because, he knows, and he can see it, and he just knows me. And I think it's just like the love that he had for watching me play the game. And I think it's, yeah, I mean, they were amazing, and they still are, but it's just crazy what they did. I mean, I think our family is probably like a lot of other hockey families, but like this is just even like a small example of like we always ate at 4:30, and my parents are like, they would always try and make it home in time to make us, pregame meal or something to snack on right before we had a practice or game. And I think it's just like those little things that like constantly, that constant work ethic they put in. I think they obviously just wanted to see it not reciprocated, but like they wanted to see that work ethic in us as well. And I think, that constant reminder, I think probably looking back, I probably could have made a, more of a genuine effort to mimic like the constant work ethic and hard work that they put into us. But then again, I mean, we're kids and we're trying to, figure stuff out, and times were a little bit different back then even. And I wouldn't say it's, the same as today, because I can still remember like having the iPhone in the dressing room and stuff. Like it wasn't as prominent and probably as dominant as it is today. I would say, a lot of kids will have that, and maybe that will take away from that just like that pure community feel that you feel with your team and like developing that culture and that atmosphere. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's just something that, this next generation has grown up upon. But it's interesting to, look back and to see how much it really has changed. But yeah, for my parents, I mean, they were amazing. They did so much for us. But I think me and my brother wanted to constantly, as much as we might have been, little shits sometimes, like I think it was like important for us to, give it our all and and see if we could make something of it. And, that's, I think that was the biggest part.
Yeah, no, for sure. Can definitely relate to that. Like, looking back, like, man, the amount our parents did, like, we could have done better. But I think that, kids will be kids. And now, well, I get to experience that one day soon when my kids are in sports and I'm sacrificing all this for them. And maybe one day you'll get that too, Tyler, and
for sure
it'll be returned to us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned the iPhones in the dressing room and stuff. And I heard you, proclaim yourself as like a dressing room guy growing up. Like you reveled in that atmosphere of the dressing room. Totally off topic, but like, how do you think that's different now with iPhones and technology and just the different from when you grew up without that?
Yeah, I think there's probably just like, I think roles within a team might just look a little bit different. But I honestly think like having those guys on your team, and they don't necessarily have to be leaders, but like having those guys on your team that can, constantly challenge your teammates in like in a harmless way. It's not like you're trying to generate ill will with a teammate, but I think at the end of the day, calling your teammates out and like making sure they're present when they come to the rink, and make sure that they're, and like having conversations, like having those like little conversations that might distract them from, constantly just like looking down at their phones. Like, I haven't obviously spent as much time in the dressing room as I maybe used to. But I think now it's just like really having those individuals on your team that can, hold each other accountable. And I think there's a right and wrong way to, hold teammates accountable, because it can get a little sticky sometimes when you're really calling your teammates out and, trying to make sure that they're present, and trying to make sure that they're listening, and trying to make sure that they're, aware of what's going on within your team and that culture. But I honestly think it's just like those select individuals that just need to step up sometimes and like challenge themselves to be an indirect leader even sometimes. Like, I think even making it a priority for some of these kids to, as hard as it may be, leaving your phone in the car, or just like, as soon as you step into that dressing room, like making a priority to like not bring your phone out, and just like, I definitely miss like that banter in the dressing room, as, as ruthless as it might get sometimes. Like, I think it is really fun. And I think that's where like that true team bond is developed, playing sewer ball, or, just in the dressing room in general, or warm-ups, or whatever it may be. I think just like being fully aware of like how your teammates are perceiving you, and also just like how you're perceiving your teammates, and like making sure that you're constantly bringing your best foot forward, and like trying as best as possible to be present in whatever situation it may be, dry land, practice, games. I think there is a lot that goes into just like that accountability and like that presentness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So, we talked a lot about, growing up and the impact hockey's had, and obviously you're still involved, but you're no longer competitive with hockey. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to us about the moment you realized that you were done with hockey.
Yeah, I think it's like obviously that going back to Humboldt and playing the 10 games and, going through that. And but I think going back and like playing and being in that environment and that community and that billet house and that dressing room again, I think really did make me realize that, sometimes it's the hard decisions that really reap the biggest benefits. And I honestly believe that, me stepping away at that time and ultimately stepping away from competitive hockey was the thing that I think led me on the path that I'm, I guess, now on. But it did take a lot, and it took a lot of like, I probably spent, at least a week thinking about it. And just like constantly going through everything of just like, am I letting everybody down that like constantly supported me throughout my career? And am I letting everybody down that constantly supported us after the accident? I think it's just like that athlete mentality to like think about everybody else. But realistically, like I can be proud of the fact that, I played junior A hockey. I was a part of a junior A team, and I was able to make it to that level. But at the end of the day, I mean, it just like wasn't my path. And I think I knew that, and I respected that, and I understood that, because I did have, friends in the NHL, and I did have friends like really, really moving on with hockey. But I think for me, I think there's only like in my role and like in what I was passionate about, I think you can really only go so far in that role, and that's okay. I was okay with that. I think it was just like a decision I needed to make. And I think, like I said, I can just be proud of the fact that I even just like went back to Humboldt for 10 games, but like losing that passion and losing that love for the game, like when I was back in Humboldt and like, starting to unravel and like starting to, not enjoy going to the rink and all this. I think for anybody that loves something, whether it's hockey, whether it's any other sport, like as soon as you really start losing that passion and that love for it, like it's so hard to get it back. And I knew that. And so when I got home, I mean, one of my first initial thoughts was like, why don't I just go play junior B in Leduc? Like, why don't I just like try and like find some enjoyment out of it again, and like try and, because at the end of the day, junior hockey is a business. And it's hard because you never really know what's going to happen next. But I think for me, I just wanted like that security and like the sense of, okay, I can show up to the rink and I can, be ready for the game, but I don't have to, this isn't my sole passion in life anymore. Like I have other things that I can do, and I'm allowed to be, I'm allowed to look forward to other things in life, but I also love the game of hockey and love that camaraderie and love that, that brotherhood and love like that banter in the dressing rooms, like I said. And I think it's hard to get that back when you've kind of reached the peak, which is what we had in Humboldt. But at the end of the day, like I needed to challenge myself and I needed to try again, and I needed to try and like find that enjoyment. And that's what I have now, of just like playing men's league and, helping out with teams here and there. Like, I think it's just like, there's no worries. Like I can just be me out there, and I can just like, I mean, in men's league, as much as I still try and as much as I still work hard, like I have other things going on in my head while I'm playing the game, and that's fine. And like, I'm allowed to, but I've respected the balance with hockey now that I need in my life, because obviously it's very good physically. I think it's probably impossible to recreate a hockey conditioning workout in the gym. Like it's just something that, growing up, like hockey conditioning is its own demon. And I think just like even like getting that sweat in is really good for me mentally. And it's just something that I do enjoy doing still.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So when you realized like that the love, the joy that you found in the sport was gone, like that was missing, and you're reevaluating, like, do I continue in some capacity back at home, or what do I do? Like at that point, how much of your identity do you think was placed in like hockey?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like even in my speeches lately, like I've kind of, transformed my first little bit into the fact that, after the accident, like at the end of the day, like a big part of my foundation was completely changed. Like the foundation of hockey that I've, known for at this time, probably 15 years of my life, was completely altered and completely changed. And I think that was like a hard thing to realize. And it was like a hard thing to go through, of like, oh my gosh, like hockey will probably never be the same. But I think at the end of the day, still being able to, respect the fact that this has been a part of your life for 15 years, and like giving up on it and going cold turkey might not be the best thing. So challenging myself in the sense that I still can get some enjoyment out of it, and I'm allowed to do this, and I'm allowed to take the steps I need to do that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that really answered your question, but I think it's just like, for me, it was my own personal journey of like, okay, like this has been a passion of my life for so many years, and I still would like it to be a part of my life. But at the end of the day, the passion will probably never be the same as what it once was. And that's fine. And that's something that, I maybe still will deal with, like even just like packing my bag and going to the rink. Like I will think about, how this was so much better probably, 5 years ago now. But I still am doing something good for myself, and I'm still, placing myself in a game that's given me so much. And do I still want to be a part of the change that needs to happen in hockey? Absolutely. There's a lot of things that, need to happen, and there's a lot of changes that need to happen. But I think at the end of the day, I can always come back to like those foundational characteristics that have built me into kind of like the man I am today, especially in like the sports space, and just like why I still have so much love for the game, and like why I still have so much love for what it can do for kids, and not just kids. Like I think just like people in general. Like I really do think it's one of the greatest sports in the world, but it also needs we do need to change some aspects.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, I think it just shows your maturity. Like, you maybe didn't answer directly, but you indirectly answered that. It sounds like you had to reevaluate. Like, you adjust the way you identify with hockey. Like, it went from probably being almost everything in your life, because I know when you're competing at that level, there's not much time or energy left for much else. Like almost everything you have is going into the sport, and that changed. It changed because it had to, and I'm sure that was a process. I think you mentioned like walking through your journey. Like it took some time to figure out how it all fit in. Can you tell us some more about that and like kind of the struggles or challenges with like finding this new place for hockey to fit in?
Yeah, like I think like when I originally left Humboldt, like my main focus was honestly like just myself for like the first time in my life. And I think like having that like perspective change of like, okay, I have been a team guy for my whole life. And even just like on the golf course when I'm playing with 3 other buddies, like it's about the other guys, and like it's about the enjoyment that they have, and it's about like, like making sure that they're having a good time. But like back to hockey, like it's always been about like others, which is good, like which is fine. Like I think there's a balance that you definitely need with, yourself and also just like your teammates, because it is such a team dominated sport. But for the first time in my life, I was like, I'm going back for myself. And I need to make some changes for myself. And I think the hardest part was like, as I look back on that team in Humboldt, like I'll just like never reach that. And like, that's no one's fault. That's like any other team I'm on from now on, or any other team I'm involved with. Like that's nobody's fault. And I'm not going to constantly compare to that team we had in Humboldt. But at the end of the day, I can respect the fact that that was it. Like that was like, this is the best thing that I will probably ever experience. And it's okay that I will probably never reach that again, but I need to find some happiness in the game and maybe other areas of it. And I think I don't even remember really when I made the decision to go back to the riggers, because it was something that, I think it was just like an instant thought. And it was like, I don't want to just, like I said, go cold turkey and just like stop everything. I still need to know, or I still need to understand what's good for me. And what's good for me maybe is, Friday night going to play a game and not have the same worries I would have had before. But then again, I mean, I was also playing with a bunch of guys that I grew up with. And it was just like, okay, like this is full circle. Like this is fun. Like this is what it's all about. And same thing, like it wasn't that team in Humboldt. Like it was never going to be that team in Humboldt, but I was able to, use the fact that maybe I didn't have the same love and passion for the game, but I could also just like have more fun with it and have less cares about, what is this person thinking about? What is this person in the stand thinking about? Like, like it's just like, I'm allowed to just do this for me. And I know that it's good for me. And I was able to kind of get back into that dressing room role and just like that pure glue guy, just because like now it was like, okay, like I really, like I'm not sounding harsh or anything, but like I really don't have the same care that I maybe once did for what others are thinking about me. Like this is just like, this is something I need to do. And this is something that I really have fun doing. And if I can, get back to that place where I can just, be a jokester in the room and make guys laugh and just screw around sometimes, then I'm just going to hold on to that. And I think I developed, really good relationships with a lot of those guys. And it was just a sense of, I was just like free. I was just like free to, figure out what it's going to take for me. Like at the end of the day, I kind of went into the, getting back into the game. And I was like, if after 5 games, like I have no fun level of this anymore, like I'm allowed to step away. Like I'm allowed to just like do what's best for me. And I think that's what gave me like that sense of okay, like this is still a team game and I love my team and I love my teammates. But at the end of the day, like I need to respect the fact that whatever's not working for me, I need to change. And whatever is working for me, I need to hold on to that. And I need to, hold myself accountable in the sense of, if this is your passion, then keep going. But if it's not, like, there's no reason that you need to start dragging this out. So I don't know, like it's kind of, all over the place, but yeah.
So when you recognized that you had been trying to make everybody happy and that everything you were doing was for everyone else, and when you realized that you needed to change that and put yourself first, is that the point where you realized like you needed to do that for your own mental health, or did you even fully comprehend that yet, or you just knew that, like, somehow you knew that needed to happen?
Yeah, I would say like, I mean, obviously up until this point, I really didn't embark on like the mental journey or like the emotional journey. And that was just like a case of we had so much shock built up and we had so much grief and trauma to unravel. Like it was almost just like hard to, figure out where to go first. And I think like ultimately me going back to Humboldt was just like, once again, a complete distraction. I knew it was good and I knew that I wanted to do it because I wanted to do it for everybody we lost and everybody that was there that day and everybody that supported us. But at the end of the day, it was still a huge distraction in like a weird way, because like I was still in the same billet house. I was still in that same dressing room. Like all the settings were the exact same, but I was distracting myself from the fact that I didn't really want to embark on that journey yet. And this was like that perfect little segue to be like, okay, well, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to work my ass off. I'm going to prove to myself I can play at that level again. And then, maybe after the season, I'll embark on that journey. But as like even that time in Humboldt, like started to really get challenging, that's when I started to realize that, okay, this is like something I need to deal with, like something I need to eventually deal with, because like I could see it in like these new teammates. I could see it in my billet parents. Like I could see it in like the people around me, that they just like, they knew me, but like they were starting to not really know me anymore, because I had so much pain and so much struggle and like so much that was constantly bottled up that I was just like not willing to share. And my billet mom honestly was like the one that really like pushed me on that path, and like was the first, like not the first one, because obviously my parents were, constantly wanting the best for me and wanting me to, open up a little and be vulnerable and, take a step in the right direction of that grief and trauma healing journey. But my billet mom was really the one that like challenged me and really, she made me make a promise. And I think that I'm not saying that that's the recipe for everybody. If you have somebody that's, in your life that's struggling, that you need to, go up to them and be like, you're going to promise me that you're going to do this. I'm not saying that's going to work for everybody, but that was for me, that first moment where it was like, oh my gosh, like this all kind of makes sense now. Like everybody can see it. Everybody knows I'm struggling, but I'm the only one that just like doesn't want to face it. And I think everybody in my life up until that point wanted me so bad to just try and like take that step and like open up just like a little bit and like show some emotion. But I was still in a mindset of like, okay, like I have no desire to do that. Like I just want to keep moving on. I'm just going to, focus on my physical health and like everything else will follow. I firmly believe that was the recipe. But this was that moment where it was like, oh my gosh, like this is like completely mental health related. And yeah, like that's, once again, like I was going back for myself. So I think at this time, I was giving myself the permission to like make mistakes and like take risks and like try new things and like try therapy and like try going for walks and like try, just like the little things that I maybe wouldn't have done before. And that was like when I started to just like have these like weights like lifted off my shoulder of like, I should have been doing this a long time ago, but I just like didn't know how to, because I thought there was a proper way to go about this, and there wasn't. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I that's so tough, man. Like, I don't even know where to really go from here. Like, everybody's journey is going to be so different. Right.
Yeah.
And I love how you say that, making a promise is maybe not for everybody, but like, how did you find you were eventually able to give yourself permission to just try something.
Yeah, I think it was like that, like, honestly, like, it goes back to just like that conversation with my billet mom. And like now acknowledging that, like, me trying so hard to distract myself and me trying so hard to like not have these conversations and me trying so hard to just like, keep this all bottled up was ultimately starting to affect the relationships with like the people that love me the most. And I think like I probably took all my relationships and conversations for granted up until this point. But then again, like, I'm such a relationship person guy. Like, I love my friends. I love meeting new people. I love my family. Like, I have so many strong relationships in my life, but I never thought to myself that, me putting this mask on and me trying so hard to just like be silent about everything was hurting the people around me as well. And I think that was kind of what led me on that path of like, okay, like, you're going to lose a lot of people in your life if you don't start, taking care of yourself and you don't start actually acknowledging that, it's about taking small steps. It's about, just like those little things in your life that you can change and like, and shifting your perspective to understand that, it's not about comparing your story. It's about being able to listen and educate yourself as well. And there was just like so many things that I was like starting to appreciate a little bit more. And there was like so many things that I now look back on and like kick myself. I'm like, why was your thought process like that? But it was just kind of like I don't know if it's directly related to being a man. I don't know if it's directly related to, playing hockey my whole life, playing sports my whole life, playing on teams my whole life. I don't think there's obviously a direct answer for like why I was not willing to go about like taking care of myself. But I'm obviously really glad that I finally did.
Yeah, no doubt. So obviously, you went through a major traumatic event and, the fallout of all of that. But there's like that's one example. That's your story. There are people dealing with mental health issues that maybe it's not brought on by one traumatic major event. Maybe it's just small. Something so insignificantly small, but it's impacting somebody in a deep, meaningful way. Like, what do you want to talk about with like mental health awareness and like maybe specific to hockey or not, but just like in looking out for these things to, just to try to identify when somebody is struggling.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think we just brought on a guy on our podcast, and I mean, he blatantly said, we all put our pants on the same way. And I think it's unfortunate because I think a lot of us as individuals, we will diminish our story because we always think to ourselves, well, people have it worse. Like there's somebody going through something much worse. And I honestly had that thought process too. I mean, we just went through something that I hope never happens again and was like such a traumatic event on a large scale, Canada wide, and I was like, still found myself thinking, well, like there's people at war right now. Like there's people going through much, much worse, like I can't, why would I show any weakness? Why would I show any, any signs of weakness by, taking care of myself? But I think it's just like, it really just comes down to like empathy and like, just like that pure compassion. And I think it's even, it was so refreshing last year to be able to coach like 11 and 12-year-olds and just see like, to live in that world again a little bit and to like understand like what these kids are now going through. And I think for a lot of us, we probably have not diminished, but we have kind of, not fully respected what we all went through with COVID. And I think the residual effects of that really, unfortunately, will have those lasting effects that it sucks. It's brutal. But I think honestly, constantly having that empathy and like, even if I was able to ask a question to a therapist we brought on the podcast. And because after a lot of my speeches, I get questions of, there's somebody in my life struggling. How do I bring this up? How do I urge them to go to therapy or try something? And I just like never had that answer just because like I was still just trying to figure it out. And I finally asked the psychologist and she was saying that, the best thing you can do is really just like empathize with them by sharing a little bit about your own story. And I'm not saying that every conversation you have to pour on about, what's working for you and like, oh, I had a terrible day, like this worked for me. But I'm saying like when you recognize that those conversations need to be had, I think just like adding that small dose of like, like this is something that has just like worked for me. And I mean, I hope you're doing well, and I hope that things are good, and I hope that I'm always here. And I think like there is like a fine line of obviously people on the other side feeling like there's pressure, or like that you need to have these conversations, or they're trying to force it out of you. And I honestly think just like recognizing when you feel as though like you can have those conversations, like don't back away from it, because it is scary. It's uncomfortable. It's difficult, especially if it's a loved one in your life. Like having those conversations and like knowing that somebody in your life is really struggling or going through something is not an easy thing to comprehend. And it's not an easy thing to like, try and put on yourself as well. But I think just like having that pure self-compassion and like turning that self-compassion and like, being that same warm, supportive friend to yourself will ultimately lead into like those conversations that I think the people around you like need to have. And I think honestly, just like listening is a huge thing. I mean, it's too bad because that's all we do every day is pretty much just listen, whether it's music, podcast, teachers, colleagues, friends, family. I mean, and we're so accustomed to listening, and I think we can all get lost in the fact that, sometimes I just don't want to listen, but being a good listener really does dictate like how good that speaker is going to be in like those, especially in those meaningful conversations. And I think I now have so much love for the fact that it's not about, offering the perfect advice or offering that perfect feedback or offering something that will instantly like be concrete in their life that they can input. But like I said, I think just like using that little bit of empathy and being like, okay, like this is really, has been really good for me. And it could be just like a random, topic that you bring up in a conversation. I think we're always so like, we almost need to guide into these conversations, and we almost need to like start with a how are you and then just like ease into it. But I honestly think like some of the best conversations I've had are just like that spontaneous question that like leads into like a more meaningful conversation. And but it's also about like creating that space and like creating that culture. Like, I mean, if that person in your life doesn't feel as though, sitting at the kitchen table with you is a space that they feel as though they can become vulnerable, then you're just not going to get anywhere. So like constantly like having those small discussions, like having those small conversations about, their day to day, and just like random, I think like random insightful questions have led to like some of my like personal, like most amazing conversations, because it just like kind of transcends into this, into that. And, so it's a tough, obviously it's a tough space because you always wish that you could do everything for your people. And you always want them to know that you're always there. But I think just like that pure compassion and empathy goes a long way.
Yeah, totally. The other thing that stands out to me is just like curiosity. Like when you when you come from a place of curiosity, just to like try to understand where they're at and what they're going through with that empathetic like approach, you can get so much. You can get somebody to open up truly.
Totally.
And also, unrelated, like from my experience, not directly with mental health, but when you're connecting with somebody and you can say like, hey, I don't really know what I'm doing either, or like I don't have the answers. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. Like when you come with that kind of approach, like we're in it together at that point.
100%. So, yeah. Couldn't agree more.
So yeah, I mean, there's so many great points you made in there. And I assume, I'm just thinking of this as a parent myself. And like, obviously I think so much of what you said can be related to like a parent-child relationship and, how we talk to our kids. Do we give them space to be vulnerable? Are we vulnerable with them? And are we giving them that opportunity to share what's going on? But yeah, I just wanted to ask like any other ideas or specifically speaking to parents, like how can they help their kids navigate through like mental health awareness issues?
That's something that I'm like currently just like tossing back and forth in my mind, and it's something that I definitely want to like even touch on more and speak in my like speaking engagements because it is such a real thing, and I think once again after COVID, it's probably gotten a lot tougher for parents and kids just because of the circumstances they just went through and like the situations they had to navigate through. And personally, for me, I love talking to youth. I love being able to make an impact on youth in any way. Like I really do love, trying to create that space in whatever engagement or whatever opportunity or whatever, just like space I'm in with youth. But I had a conversation the other day with a gentleman I really enjoy, and we actually were talking about like there's so much emphasis on obviously making sure that we're having these conversations with youth early on and like trying to make them aware of mental health and trying to make them aware of what's going on. And you can be this, you can be vulnerable, you can do all that. But I honestly think we were talking about how much more persistent we should be, not persistent, but like how much more we should do for our parents and we should do for our teachers and we should do for our coaches. And I think just like that pure educational level for them of just like helping them understand that, like it's not going to be easy. And I was the same way as a kid. I probably didn't give my parents much at a lot of times, but I think you hit the nail on the head perfectly. It's just like that pure curiosity. And that's something now I enjoy a lot more. Is just like even when I was coaching last year, like just like going up to a kid and just being like, what'd you have for dinner? What happened today? Like, give me something. I think just like having those fun, lighthearted conversations will lead eventually into like those conversations that you want to have, because that's, I think, where like you start creating that environment and you start creating that space. And I mean, I had, the odd kid crying after a shift, and like, I know that like, because I've had those like small conversations with them and like got to know them a little bit more, I'm allowed to like, step off the bench and figure out what's going on with them and try to, navigate that new situation with them as they're, emotional after a shift or emotional after a game or whatever it is. I mean, that space has been created, and that's something that, I love doing, but it's also a very hard space to navigate because, like I said, at the end of the day, I think, we always look to parents as our superheroes that have all the answers, and they don't. But I think just like even like relating to the kids and, reflecting on, your journey while also inputting it into your conversation with that kid or that student or that, player or whatever it is. I think just like adding that little bit of context and a little bit of relatability, especially from a kid to an adult space, I think that relatability does go a long way, because I will look back and I would be like, I probably didn't have these conversations with these adults and my coaches and my teachers because, I thought they're not going to really be able to relate to me. Like they've lived a whole life, they're way older, they're adults. Like, why would I really want to, try and, I don't know where I'm, but like at the end of the day, I think it's just like that pure curiosity and like that pure relatability of it. And like also giving our parents the space to be vulnerable. Like I probably didn't, maybe my brother and I maybe didn't give us as much space as we should have to our parents, of them being like, what's going on with you? But then again, it's tough because I feel like from the parent perspective, you obviously never want to put too much on your kids. And I'm acting like I'm a parent. I'm not a parent, but I've definitely just like learned a lot about like the mental health, like conversation space, especially. But yeah, I mean, I think it just all goes back to like that curiosity, relatability, and just like creating that space wherever it may be.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that was a great answer. And yeah, from my limited perspective as a parent, kids are 5 and 3.5, so we've got a long ways to go. But that vulnerability piece, like we can't expect people to be vulnerable with us if we're not willing to go there with them.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think that there's a healthy way to do that inside the family dynamic. I'm not saying it's easy, and I don't know exactly what it looks like. It's going to be different for everybody probably, but I think there's a way that parents can be vulnerable with their kids and therefore get that back from them.
1000%. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, man, you've touched on so many things that you're up to these days. You got a podcast, you're doing speaking. Obviously, you're passionate about this mental health space and everything going on. Just tell everybody, yeah, like what's going on in your life. Where can people find you?
Yeah. Believe it or not, I'm a speaker, but I actually don't really love talking about myself. But I now, appreciate how much power a story can have. And I think that's ultimately kind of what's led me on this journey to, I guess, share my story a little bit. But as I look back on like all the engagements I've done, like obviously, like I said, youth is a huge thing for me, and like touch and like making sure like I'm trying to make an impact on youth and like doing as much speaking in front of youth, high schools, junior highs, whatever it may be. But it's crazy to look back on because I think youth, there is quite a bit of hesitation, like following a speech to go up and, thank you for this, this made an impact in this space. It is wild, like how many conversations like I've had with adults post speaking engagements. And I think that's what really made me understand, how tough it's been for not just our kids and not just the pressures they're facing and not just like the social anxiety that they must be facing every day, but like our parents and like our adults in our world and like our teachers and our coaches. I've had some of the most profound conversations with them. And it just goes to show that like everyone has a story and everyone's fighting a battle. And we've all had way too much time with our own thoughts over these past couple of years, which has probably led back to like those childhood trauma experiences and like all that you've been through in your life, which has kind of led you to this point that maybe it's like, okay, like I haven't done anything for me in a long time. And I just did a speech and an adult came up to me, a younger, parent, and she came up and she said, work constantly takes over my life. I'm constantly, putting as much time and effort into my kids as possible, but it's led me to neglect myself. And it's led me to like neglect like my own journey and the fact that I probably need to go to therapy again. And I think like all these conversations I have like really just make me appreciate the fact that you just never know when somebody needs to hear something and you never know when somebody needs to see something. And it could be small, it could be minor, it could be major. But as soon as people listening hear something that clicks, I mean, those seconds like right after will just like be making sure that they're taking the time to like understand what just was said and like putting it into their own life. And for me, speaking is very therapeutic. It's healing. I'm constantly learning. I want to constantly like expand and like try and like hit different points and like hit different topics that we maybe usually don't talk about. But at the end of the day, like I'm the furthest thing from an expert. Like I don't know anything. Like I'm a 24-year-old kid that unfortunately went through something very, very traumatic. And it's going to be something that I think about every day for the rest of my life. But I know that, me trying to get out there and connect more and reach more audiences might indirectly, help a lot of people. And that's something that I will continue to hold on to. And that's something that, even the clothing line with our Not Alone, we wanted to just like slap messages and like slap mental health messages and words like right on the clothing, right on the front, right on the back, right by the neck, wherever it may be, just because, like I said, you just never know when somebody needs to see something. And like seeing that quote will make you think about it instantly and might turn into a meaningful conversation at the dinner table later that has needed to be had for a long time. But sometimes people just need that extra little push and that extra little, kick in the butt. And I needed it. And I know that a lot of people do need it. And so whether it's the speaking, whether it's the clothing line, or whether it's the podcast, I think it's just, helping facilitate those tough conversations that you probably wouldn't normally have with your loved ones. There's no formula to this. I wish there was. But I think the best part is like I'm not an expert and I want to continually keep learning and keep growing in that space, which will hopefully help, impact a lot more people. But I mean, if I only impact one person in a crowd of 1,000 people, then I think honestly, like mission accomplished, like my goal is achieved. So yeah, I mean, it's, did I anticipate doing any of these things? Absolutely not. But it's something that, I have found passion in, and I'm going to keep doing, for as long as I still have that passion and as long as I still have that authenticity with it. if I'm not being authentic and I'm just going up and, just doing this monotonous little agenda of, covering everything that I usually talk about, and I'm not getting any enjoyment out of it, and I'm not getting the enjoyment I usually would with the conversations afterwards, then I'll be done. But for right now, I really just enjoy that pure connection and that pure sense of you just never know. So.
Love it, man. Oh, it's so great. I love all the things that you're doing, and there's no doubt the impact that you are having is huge, and huge can be categorized as one person.
Well, thanks, Chris.
So,
yeah, no, it's you just unfortunately, this isn't a battle to be won. But if I can help, a couple people just even take a few steps forward in their life, then that's what it's truly all about. So
yeah, awesome, man. No, love what you're doing, and we'll definitely have links in the show notes to the podcast, to Not Alone, the clothing brand, and even yourself. If people want to get in contact with you for speaking engagement, we can have all your info in there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I love what you're doing. And I think it's probably for you even something that you maybe never anticipated doing, but I think it's, there's a lot of power in a connection, and there's a lot of power in a story. And I think, I know from the podcast world, that's been my favorite part, is just constantly learning and constantly thinking about things from a different perspective. So thanks again.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Tyler, for being on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Sport Life Balance podcast. We hope this episode inspired and encouraged you as you navigate the demands of sport and life. Be sure to subscribe anywhere you listen and leave us a review. We would greatly appreciate it. You can also find us and follow along on Instagram at the Sport Life Balance. Until next time, wishing you all the best in your sports journey.